Hey, welcome to the Liverpool Community Podcast. I'm your host, Chase Johnson Lynch, and we have decided to bring back the series of programs that we used to do back in the day. On one time, we went Mental Health Awareness Week. Another time, it was female women empowerment.
Women in music.
Yeah, exactly.
Women in
Thank you,
music.
Phil. I'm glad I got Phil here at the desk. I wouldn't know what I was doing without him.
So sarcastic.
No, I am. But still, but this time we decided to focus in on the upcoming event of the Merseyside Women of the Year Awards and everything that are coming up on the 28th of June at the Crown Plaza this year. I mean, we've known several people who been participating in this sport, haven't we, Phil? From Alison Furlong
Yes,
to
that's right.
Haley
That's right.
Kincaid,
That's right.
even my ex-wife.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Let's not go there, shall we, Chase?
No. So, like, what he is that today I am joined by one of the lovely finalists that is up for this award, Lynnette Akwei Howe.
Hello,
Hello, Lynnette. Did I get that right?
Akwei Howe.
Akwei Howe. Yes. And basically, now you'll find out that Lynnette has an extensive history and everything in this, but this being a finalist is well deserved, and we're going to get into all of that. So to begin with, Lynnette, what is it that you do? I believe you're the founder of something.
So I'm the CEO and founder of Creating Community. And broadly speaking, it's family education and mental health support. What does that look like? We've got a sort of number of strands. We've got a clinical team who, in essence, all our referrals that come in, people can self-refer, but we get a lot of referrals from social care, education, NHS CAMS, etc., other community organisations. And that team is a clinical psych with assistant psychologists, and basically they do that initial assessment process of going, where's this person at? What are the best interventions, whether that's within the organisation or our delivery partners, or whether that's further out in community. We then have our family wellbeing engagement workers, and they do what we refer to as wraparound support. And it's very much person-centred, so it is entirely dictated by the individual and the families of going, what are they trying to achieve? Now, that might simply be, someone to talk to because actually they haven't got anybody else that they can go to. It may be that actually they're struggling with the cost of living, which many people are at the moment. So it might be getting them access, whether that's through, if we have funding for that, or whether that's through other community organisations that may have that funding. But it may be actually, I'm struggling, I've been several meetings with school or with social care, and I'm struggling with those conversations because actually it just makes me feel completely stressed out. Can someone come with me to sit in on that so that they can take notes and help me out? So that can look like anything that the individual wants.
But it's
to a certain-
intergenerational support, isn't it? Like it's both parents and young people, and that's one of the differences in your organization.
So we work with both the adults and the children and young people. And then they are all level 5 trained coaches. So it may just be actually, if you're focusing on your mental health, that actually they will catch up with you and sort of run through what are those strategies you're trying to put in place and how you're trying to achieve that on an ongoing basis. We've then got our facilitation team. So they look at courses in essence. So we do psychosocial education courses around adverse childhood experiences, recovery if people have had domestic violence experience, reducing parental conflict, parenting programs, managing stress, all those things that are sort of related to mental health support.
Yeah, and trauma, isn't it?
And trauma. And it's about giving them back that information of going, these are the things that you can do to be able to support yourself to achieve those goals in terms of whatever development and progress you're looking to make. We've then got our delivery partners, so then there's access to therapy through our delivery partners. So we work with Koala Northwest, who also do some work around sleep. We work with Heswell Hills Counselling Centre, who obviously provide the direct therapy, and we work with Hatch, which is another community organisation, who do peer-mentored CBT for the children and young people. And then Following all of that, we have what we refer to as community embedding, because we know that nobody does a course or goes to therapy or whatever else and life is just magically taken care of. So then we run peer support groups, walking Wednesdays, afternoon teas, coffee mornings, family activities, whatever that might look like,
Yeah.
so that people can then just come and be in an environment where they can feel supported. And should anything occur, any new stresses or any new crisis come up, they're already with us, and then that can be picked back up quite quickly. So we
Yeah.
never really let people go, although they may be technically closed. In
You
terms
continue
of the
support
intervention,
afterwards and stuff.
the support continues, and we put them. What we do is de-escalate them to quarterly well-being checks, and encourage them to be part of that community embedding.
Well, I mean, you said like a lot of the research that this is all stemming from is like adverse childhood experiences, what you call ACEs, right? And I mean, that's a term that people probably have heard of, isn't it?
So yes, ACEs, definitely, adverse childhood experience, is something that has become more forward focused, shall we say, over the last few years. I know when I first started talking about ACEs and trauma, there were definitely a few eyebrows raised. But basically, the research started out in the States back in '95, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And they were looking at
You
really
said
trying to
obesity or
address the
something.
obesity crisis,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, what I'm curious about is that because the research has started so early on in '95, as you say, and has been continuing on, we only in recent years have we looked at the autistic spectrum, and I'm kind of curious about how does that affect the research that is going on now.
So there's certainly some evidence that your neurodivergent individuals, there is some link potentially to adversity in childhood. The wonderful, clever people that are out there are still doing more and more research. So how exactly that plays out is yet to be pinned down. I know that there was some recent research showing that actually, although in toxic stress and trauma we over prune the neurological connections in our brain, that actually they're looking at ADHD and autism, and there seems to be a link with under pruning in the cortical region specifically. So that's all still playing out in terms of what those direct links, but there is definitely a correlation between adversity and neurodiversity to some extent.
And like, I had a question here, is like, or basically maybe in a statement that you made is like, how can we relieve stress to genuinely heal? Isn't that one of your like ethos?
Yeah, so we take a trauma informed approach, which firstly is about all of us as individuals, whether that's us as average Joe in the street or whether that's professionals or whoever it might be, recognizing what trauma is. So outside of the 10 ACEs questions, then there are issues with those questions, and the powers that be are still arguing as to how that should be used, whether it should be automatic screening or not. But it's also understanding your broader ACEs. It's also understanding those societal issues around bullying, or it might be systemic issues such as racism and sexism and disableism, etc. Some of those issues around the communities that we live in. If we've witnessed an attack or violence in any shape, way, or form, that actually that toxic stress also impacts in terms of brain development and neurological development. So that from a trauma-informed approach, it's one, recognizing what trauma is, and then working to, one, not re-traumatize, which in its simplest form of thinking about that is about minimizing the stress response. Now, that's not to say that an individual should never be stressed,
Yeah.
because actually some levels of stress are positive and build resilience, but it's about reducing the unnecessary toxic stress and that chronic stress that's just ongoing. So living in those environments where actually we're struggling, whether it's with housing or whether it's actually, parents are struggling with mental health issues, or actually parents have got 3 jobs so they're not around, so the children are left to take on genuine adult responsibility because the teenager's left looking after the baby, not for any other reason. That's just the practicality of living. So a big part of us is about trying to get people to understand one, what trauma genuinely looks like. Two, put down that sense of blame or guilt or shame of going, there is no blame. We are all just genuinely doing as best we can. But then also looking at what that work is that we can do to genuinely heal. And that's really about rebuilding new neurological connections, and doing that brainstem and limbic function activity. Now, what does that look like in real terms? Your brainstem is where all of your physical movement, your sensory work, so most people are aware of your five senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. You actually have three additional senses: balance, your vestibular function; interoception, your body awareness, so the thing that tells you whether you need to pee or whether you're hungry.
My spider sense.
There we go. And proprioception, which is about spatial awareness and pressure. So why hugs, and that sort of thing. But also why outdoor play is amazing. Because actually your body is working on proprioception when you're hanging off the monkey bars.
Wow.
So it's kind of understanding all of those elements and then going, okay, so what can we put back into place? The other real part around trauma-informed approaches is that the real protective factor is about attachment. It's who are those people around you that make you feel safe? Who can you go to if you're worried? Who can you talk to? Is there somewhere to go? So what are those relationships? Which is, again, all limbic function, because that's where all our emotions and all those nice parts live. So that all just helps reduce our stress responses, and our sense of fear and danger, and brings us back to a slightly calming place. And that, for some of us that are older, was obviously going to take us a long while to rebuild some new...
To re-educate ourselves,
to rebuild some new collections.
Rebuild? What am I? $6 million man? Something like that.
But actually, if we can get in there early working with our children and young people, we can mitigate a lot of that impact of those.
This is indeed true. I mean, because a lot of people do a lot of psychotherapy later in life and stuff like that. But, it's always curious as to, when can you start something like that? You know what I mean? Because usually when you talk about trauma, it always goes back to some kind of childhood trauma and everything. But then again, it's just that doesn't mean you have to wait till you're in your 40s to revisit that. I'm really rather curious as to what a young person in their 20s, what would it be like for them to revisit and to learn and to move forward from it? What do you think?
No, absolutely. And I think there's an element of not wanting to get hung up on a clinical model of going, everybody needs therapy. The system cannot sustain that. It's simply not practical to go, everyone has access to therapy. But actually, if we develop our knowledge and our education, then that's why we're quite focused in terms of the psychosocial education of going, what is going on for us? And then we can empower ourselves to go, okay, so actually, if I understand what's happening for me, these are the things I can do to mitigate that. And the more we recognize it, so it might be for some of the work that we do with children and young people, and we work with young people down to primary school, it might be just getting them to recognize, actually, I get bellyache when I'm stressed. I get earache when I'm stressed. Or whatever that might look like for them.
Yeah.
It's giving them strategies to go, okay, once you've recognized that happening, what can you do? Well, actually, I'm 6. I know I get bellyache because mum's spoken to me about that, or it's been spoken to me about at school or at youth club, wherever that might be.
Or I'm hearing my parents argue.
Breathing techniques, but what does that look like for a 5-year-old? We don't want them to stick on a, guided meditation and have to start sitting there and going, whatever. It might look like blowing bubbles.
I just seen that.
Because actually blowing bubbles, to effectively blow bubbles, you've got to do the breathing.
Yeah.
It might be doing the meditation. So we do a lovely meditation with the young people and right up into teens. It's the chocolate meditation. It's the biscuit meditation. Actually, while you're eating that piece of chocolate, think about, how does it feel when it first goes into your mouth? How does it feel as it melts? Really taste it. So you can do those bits. But actually, for children and young people, it's getting out there. Many people say now that, they're being told more and more exercise and yoga.
Yeah.
So I believe Harvard University did a study into yoga, 20 minutes a day. They MRI'd people at the beginning and then again at the end after the 21 days. And within 21 days of 20 minutes of yoga a day, they could already see an increase in neurological connections.
Yeah.
But the same is true of exercise. Actually, just get out, play, get involved, because all of those things are, in essence, brainstem and limbic function activities.
Yeah.
Because to be able to run around and play, you are using that area of your brain. Teenagers, give them a little bit of real risk. Go and climb the climbing frame. We know that the brain
We used to do it when we were kids in the 70s.
Bingo. Teen and the teenage phase is looking for more risk-taking behaviours, and we know that a brain that has experienced toxic stress and childhood trauma is less inclined to and less able to moderate those risk-taking behaviours.
Yeah.
So actually give them structured risk-taking behaviours. The forest schools, the climbing wall, the zip wire, whatever it might.
Well, it's like, it's like, let's put them into a time capsule, return them back to the 70s. I can imagine Phil climbing a tree. You know what I mean? It's like, it's what you used to do, right, Phil?
No, man, not with my height problem.
All right, Phil. Always the negative. Contrarian. All right, so wait a minute now. Lynnette, this is all very interesting, but I got to get to your origin story before we go.
We've got a way to go yet.
All right, Phil. I'm not. So, origin. So, I mean, basically, this is powerful. I mean, being a founder of such an organization with such a value of supporting of other people and their mental health and everything like that, who does that? So, basically, where does that kind of person come from? So, your origin there, Akwei, and that doesn't mean give me everything, because I got some of it down here, but give me something.
Okay, so origin story. Mum's half Filipino, half Spanish. Dad's half Ghanaian, half Togolese, so West African. Born in Nigeria. Came to the UK when I was 9. Went to boarding school. Came out of boarding school and ended up in inner city London, in Brockley, Lewisham, South East London. So shout out to the South East London massive out there.
I think that's where that accent's coming from.
Indeed.
I was then adopted by my sister when I was 13, 14. Studied maths at uni, started teaching, did that for a couple of years, went and worked in IT recruitment, went back to teaching because decided that actually really wanted to be back in my classroom, really wanted to work with young people. And then life threw me a bit of a curveball and I ended up fostering 3 little people. They're not so little now. Youngest is coming up 24, and then the older 2 are 27 and 28.
But it seemed like you were concerned about how are they going to make it in the world of work.
Yeah, and I think that's why we started with what we started as creating careers. Off the back of that experience, looking at them as little people, it kind of struck me of going, how do those children whose parents aren't in work or who don't have the networks or the connections, how do they have those opportunities of work experience, etc.? When we started that work initially, we were working with Porchlight, which is a homeless charity down in Kent, and Circle Housing, which is one of the housing associations. And through that work of talking to young people, what we realised was that actually a lot of them were talking about mental health issues, and a lot of those mental health issues were about them reporting adversity in childhood. Now, in 2014, I moved up to the Wirral, and so what we decided to look at of going, as they were coming back with more and more around, actually this was about childhood adversity, we wanted to do some work with the parents. And then in starting that work with the parents, what we realised, we were back at mental health. And that was when, as I said earlier on, I had the magic moment because I came across the ACEs study and the ACEs research. And it went, wonderful, this is why we are all the way we are.
And this was like your big idea moment kind of thing that leads us to creating community, isn't it?
Yes, and it was kind of a natural evolution, really, an organic growth.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Of going, actually understanding that trauma information and the research around adverse childhood experiences, I put my hand up to being undiagnosed ADHD. I've just started that process, and the joy of that was meant I went into sort of hyper focus over looking at all the research that was out there and read as many research papers as I could find, of going, what is all the stuff that those wonderful clever people who've taken years to figure this out are actually saying in terms of what is that healing process, and what is that impact, but allowing and then going, how can we empower other people to kind of understand this, right, so that they, we can all sit and wait for the access to mental health, whether that's for children, whether that's for adults, but we know how hard that is. But what's the stuff that we can crack on with doing? And more importantly, how can we mitigate that for the next generation below us? How can we mitigate that for our kids? Because inadvertently, we all end up creating some levels of trauma for our children. So actually, if we bring that conversation out into the open and allow people to gain that knowledge, so that was where it then sort of started to transform. And then off the back of doing the courses, what parents were telling us was going, well, actually, access to therapy is quite difficult. Actually, it's fine while we do the courses and we're talking about it every week. But then once we stop, how do we sustain that? So that was where the community embedding came from.
Right.
They were saying, oh, actually, these are the issues we're struggling with. We're not sleeping because the child's not sleeping because they're up and down all night. So where we then pulled in the delivery partners, it was parents saying, actually, my child's not in school because their behaviour and their emotional regulation is so poor that they've been out of school. Is there some way of working directly with them around the emotional regulation stuff?
Yeah.
So we then started doing that work too. So it's been a very sort of organic growth,
Yeah,
in terms of the organisation.
well, I mean, but also personally, though, I mean, like in dealing with all these trauma issues and being involved in all this, you had faced your own personal kind of trauma, didn't you? Where admittedly you suffered through agoraphobia at one point.
Yep.
But now, reason why I just wanted to know what you thought about that is because it didn't last for very long. So it wasn't like some end all be all, like, this is who I am, put this stamp on my head, and that's what, because, so I'm just curious as what happened for you?
So from that perspective, I happily put my hand up to my 6 aces, and I'm going to put that out there of going, 6 aces does not mean you have more trauma than 1 ace, because actually what may have happened to you with that one,
Yeah.
might be much more rather, than the 6. But at least what it does, it gives an idea of going, yeah, there was a breadth of issues that was going on. And that was just growing up, and for most of us it is, and
Yeah.
it just looks like life. Moved into adulthood, and was back at work full time, was looking after the 3 foster kids. There was financial pressures. I'd given up work to look after the children, and then had tried to go back to work full time. There were various issues that were going on in terms of looking after the children. So there was just an awful lot of pressure at that point. And that manifested as agoraphobia. So for about 3 months, really struggled to literally get out the house. Had put opaque film over all of my windows because I couldn't bear the idea of sort of being seen or being overlooked. And then slowly over that time period, I was very conscious even then, although I hadn't come across the ACEs research, I was still very conscious of going, okay, this can't be living, but it felt very raw to be out. And so we just did that in small steps of getting to the point where I could get out in the garden. But I guess I'm also very lucky, whether that was through childhood or through adulthood. I've been very fortunate is that I've got an amazing support network. Had an awful lot of protective factors around me. We talked earlier on about going, actually, it's some of that work around who are those people where you feel safe. So I'm very fortunate in going, I do have a wonderful network of people, and after about 3 months, I spent from April through July at home, but I had a couple of people who'd say, okay, that's fine, we'll drive the car to the door so that you can go straight from the front door into the car and you don't have to feel like you're outside to just try and get me out. I spent the summer with my sister, and that made a huge difference to just be out of my environment and somewhere else completely. We then went and visited my brother, who actually currently lives in the Czech Republic. So spent some time there, and although the transition through airports, etc., was quite difficult, once I was able to be inside again, that really helped. And really off the back of that was where I then took a decision of going, actually, my mental health is more important than sort of maintaining whatever those societal standards are. And that was the point where I decided to try and focus on creating careers rather than going back to work full time.
And then look at what you did create, and I mean, it's an amazing story, Lynnette, and I appreciate your honesty for sharing that, because it's like, there's somebody out there who might be struggling, and everything, and not knowing when you're inside the fishbowl that you're in the fishbowl, and not knowing that there's a way out and everything. So I do appreciate you sharing that and everything. So what's important is that to do this project, creating community, it has to be funded, as usual. Most projects are. At the moment, it's funded by the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership, and everything. And and you know how funding is; it doesn't last. So I mean, obviously, hopefully, people can hey, if you think that this is a worthwhile organization, it's always helpful, right?
Absolutely. Funding, I think, for every community organisation and for charities, etc., is an ongoing issue.
Of course it is.
So any help and support in that aspect. We've got a few of our team that are going off to do the Velocity Zip Wire to try and raise some funds.
Well, you also
Not me. I have a profound issue with the fear of heights, so I will be firmly on the ground.
And I said I said I don't have a fear of heights. I have a fear of falling from them.
Yes.
But then also you are doing business training as well.
Yes, so we also do some professional training around the adverse childhood experiences awareness, because again, if organisations, businesses, everybody becomes aware of how this looks,
I think this would be very important for that.
what that then means is that actually we can be more supportive and create that genuine societal culture, with a bit more compassion in recognising where do people issues sit. But outside of that, we also do training in managing stress and well-being, youth mental health and adult mental health first aid.
Yeah, what was but
Wow.
yeah, wow. Thanks, Phil. I just love chatting with him. Your website, I think it's very important for people to know. Basically, it's creatingcommunity.com. But what's interesting is it's spelled with an 8. So that's CREA8ING. You'll see it under me written down, creatingcommunity.com. And when I asked for what you got coming up, you actually have a graduation coming up for service users, don't you?
So all the families, etc., that have been part of programs and courses and the long programs and courses, we do a biannual graduation, because we recognise it's a long time. The shortest of the main courses is 5 weeks, but they go up to 13 weeks. And they share their stories and their journeys, and that's not easy. No. So we have a celebration event, usually one just in around January. Our next one is on the 17th of July. Venue to be confirmed.
So we're looking for a venue. Support. Go ahead.
And what we have there is, one, they get their certificates. Two, we organise other organisations that come along and share what they do that might be helpful to parents. But the parents also share their stories and their journeys. We also have an Inspirational Parent Award that is completely voted on by the cohort of parents that has been on that course with them, because it's not about looking like the perfect Facebook social media parent, or doing anything perfectly. It's about the others in that group recognising that actually your resilience, your journey, and the fact that here you are as a parent still doing what you can to support your family is really inspirational. So they do that vote, and we give out those awards at the graduation event as well.
So again, fascinating story there, Lynnette, and everything. But being that this is the Merseyside Women of the Year and you're a finalist, obviously you got to ask the question, how do you feel about being a finalist for this award?
So incredibly grateful. I've actually been as an attendee for the last few years, and so it's wonderful to have this event that truly celebrates women.
Yeah.
We don't even think about it, but when you look at a lot of the awards, it is predominantly male. So to have something that really just recognises what women are doing is fantastic. But genuinely on a personal level, grateful that, one, somebody wanted and thought that what I was doing was worthy of nominating. And two, that actually of all of those people that were nominated to have made it to be a finalist. So very grateful to the panel for getting me this far. And yes, fingers crossed, we see how we go.
No, exactly. I mean, that's always the best polite answer. I think about it like the Oscars, when they put up the screens, the squares, and the winner is, and then like your face. I mean, I wonder what your face will be. It's like, exhilarated that I won, or that I lost. Good thing there are no cameras going to be on it, but I'm just saying.
It will be somewhere in between, because the irony is that I'm genuinely really pleased.
Yeah.
And genuinely will be pleased if I win. But as we've discussed just in doing this interview, the whole being on camera and being out there, everyone teases me at work because I make them all take pictures for everything.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I hide from those pictures.
Yeah.
But I'm having to
You're having to step forward.
Embrace the camera.
Embrace the camera. I'm not going to do the Tom Cruise line, but embrace the camera.
Not today, Zerg.
I don't know what he said. He's from Brummie.
Sorry, I am. Yeah.
Anyway,
sins, I am.
So once again, I'd like to thank Lynnette Akwei Howe, who's the founder of Creating Community. You can find them on creatingcommunity.com. And the upcoming event, I think, is a great celebratory event for people who graduate from the program, and everything coming up on the 8th of July, but 17th of July, sorry. But this particular event, the Merseyside Women of the Year, will be the 28th of June at the Crown Plaza. And congratulations, and, wish you luck, all the luck in the world, Lynnette.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining me here in our series on what?
And me.
He interrupted my outro, as he does.
And me, don't forget.
Thank you for joining Phil here. You can't see him, but you hear him. You know what I mean? He matters so much in everything. We couldn't do it without him.
Well,
Absolutely not.
Thank you, Lynnette. We couldn't do it without him, right? Oh, where would I be without Phil? So thank you for joining us here at the Liverpool Community Podcast. And for now, we out of here.